Hi, everyone. I'm delighted that you've chosen to join this Disruptive Innovation Novice to Expert Session 1, which is the start of a number of sessions that I plan to do. All these sessions will be for free, and hopefully they will help you learn more about disruptive innovation, which I think is going to be a very powerful force in the coming years. Now, why am I doing these sessions? I'm doing these sessions because disruptive innovation has been very good for me. It has helped me retire at 45. And by retire, I just mean that I've had the freedom to do whatever I choose to do. But more important than that, as to what disruptive innovation has done for me personally, I think it has given me great satisfaction on having worked on disruptive innovation that has benefited many, many people and changed their lives for the better. Now, these may have been companies or these may have been individuals, but that really is my motivation to try and share some of my learnings with you, because all of you who are young, maybe old, maybe in companies, maybe on your own, you may be in government, or you may be a politician, you may be a regulator or part of the judiciary. I hope some of these sessions will benefit you, and working together, we can improve the lives of many people using disruptive innovation. Okay, so let's get started by trying to understand that why should you learn disruptive innovation from me? We will very soon get into what disruptive innovation is, but whatever it is, why should you learn it from me? Because you have many learning choices. Maybe you're one of those very lucky people who has got a gift from God and you don't need to learn disruptive innovation. You're just naturally gifted and you're good at it. Or you could be a self-learner. You could learn it from the web. You could learn it by attending a course, maybe an online distance education course, or you could go to a university, a top university, and learn it from academics. Or you could actually learn it from practitioners, like people who have done disruptive innovation or are doing disruptive innovation. Now, I count myself as a practitioner who has hit 3 successful home runs, because like disruptive innovation, to take a cricket analogy rather than baseball analogy, is like hitting a sixer. It's not like taking a single or playing a dot ball. So I have been very fortunate to be to be a successful player who's hit at least 3 sixers. I have tried at certain times and failed as well, but I have been a practitioner. So if you learn from me, you will be learning from a practitioner. So you won't be learning from an academic or someone who is an expert. So one of the problems in learning from a practitioner is that a practitioner may be a good player, but they may not be a good teacher or a good coach. So, we'll see whether you find these lessons interesting and whether actually you can benefit by learning from me. Now, one of the good things about learning from me is that I don't claim that I have the definitive answers about how someone should practice disruptive innovation. I can give you some tips, some tricks, but you must, and I would encourage you to learn from whatever sources you can learn from. So with that said, let's move on to what we will cover in this first session. So first, we'll describe what is disruptive innovation, because a lot of people, when I've talked to them, there are all kinds of things that come into their head when you use this term, disruptive innovation. After having defined that, we'll move on to trying to see why is disruptive innovation important. Why should one learn it? And some of the costs and benefits of disruptive innovation. So like with disruptive innovation, there's no free lunch. There are some costs. There could be collateral damage, which we'll discuss in a little more detail when we talk about the costs and benefits of disruptive innovation. Then who are the people who should learn disruptive innovation? And they probably need to learn it from from different perspectives. So we will talk about a little bit about that. And finally, what will this journey look like? This from, say, if today you're a disruptive innovation novice, or even at an intermediate step, what is it that it will take you to become an expert, and what are the various steps involved is something that we will look at as well. So let's start with what is disruptive innovation. So the first thing to understand is disruptive innovation is different from innovation. So someone was recently asking about how the government schools in Delhi are becoming better. So there are some government schools which are pretty bad. They have been transformed. The infrastructure has been improved. And maybe there are 10, 15 schools out of like maybe more than 200, which have become much better. There are probably good outcomes. The people are motivated. The students are motivated. The parents are motivated, and so on and so forth. Now, would this be an innovation, or would this be an innovation leading to transformation, or would it be a disruptive innovation? So this really would be an innovation. And we'll come to what would make it a disruptive innovation a little later. But the thing to understand is that one of the analogies that I've heard, and it's not a particularly good analogy, but we'll use it, is that innovation is like working on vitamins. So vitamins can make you do things cheaper, faster, better. But disruptive innovation is like working on a painkiller. So if there is a system with a lot of pain and you are able to remove the pain, and maybe permanently, or improve it or lessen the chronic pain and really improve the system, then you're doing disruptive innovation. So in Silicon Valley, people often talk about, is this a vitamin company or is this a painkiller company? So this is what they mean. So painkiller companies are those which are trying to pursue disruptive innovation, while the other companies which are working on incremental improvements, which are very important. So continuous improvement is very important. But it's not disruptive innovation. So that is the vitamin companies, cheaper, faster, better. So having understood this, let's talk about a term called BHAG, which stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goals. So if you set something which sounds almost crazy, but not totally crazy as in science fiction, right? So if you say, I think in the next 30 years, a man will be on Mars now, or we'll have a colony on Mars, maybe in 50 years. Now, this would be like a big, hairy, audacious goal and not necessarily science fiction, because we more or less know there are some innovations, many innovations required to get a colony on Mars, but it is not like totally improbable. Now, something like teleportation might be in the realm of science fiction. So again, here, when we are talking about disruptive innovation, and there are people who come up with these big, hairy, audacious goals, then a successful disruptive innovator often makes these goals become real, while a person who just dreams is just a dreamer and then they're not a disruptive innovator. Okay. So now, is disruptive innovation all good? And the answer clearly is no. There are many problems with disruptive innovation. When you try to do disruptive innovation, failure is part of it. There may be a number of losses, including the losses of human life. There may be problems of raising people's expectations and then dashing them to the ground. So a lot of investors could lose a lot of money if a disruptive innovation fails. Sometimes a disruptive innovator may start off with very good intentions, but then they start drinking their own Kool-Aid and they become so full of themselves and they just can't believe that their innovation is going to fail, even though the evidence is mounting, that they end up creating scams. And if they are very good salespeople, then it can create a lot of problems. So I'm talking about the case of Theranos, where this person was saying that they have this incredible innovation where you give them a drop of blood, and from that they are able to tell you all kinds of things, and a lot of people believe them. So if you actually go to Netflix and look at Bad Blood, the documentary, then you will see how disruptive innovation and or disruptive innovators can be very problematic. Now, one of the things that I want to end this particular piece on what is disruptive innovation is talking about how in the Vedas, and if you talk about Brahma, Mahesh, Vishnu, so Brahma was the creator, then there was Vishnu the preserver and Shiv the destroyer. And there was this constant cycle of things being born, moving along with increasing entropy till they finally got destroyed. And then they were born again. Right, so that is somewhat the Vedic philosophy, whether it's right or wrong. But it's a very good thing to understand because disruptive innovation fits right in. You have the constant interplay between disruptive innovation, which is like almost like Shiv doing a Tandav and trying to destroy things. And then there is Vishnu, who's trying to preserve them. And there is this constant battle which is going on. Now, if you look at nature, so if you look at a forest, so when I visited the sequoia forests in California, this was explained to me that there is a natural thing that when the forest becomes too dense, there are lightning strikes and so on and so forth, and there are forest fires which destroy the forest to some extent, and then the forest is reborn, right? So this cycle keeps going on. So one of the things that I like is that if there was something, when you talk about the word disruptive, it's not a very nice word. You don't want to disrupt something. But if it is natural, if it is the way things move, the way the universe moves, then that gives me comfort that disruptive innovation is not something which is very bad, but it is a way of life. It is something that is going to happen. So very, very large incumbent companies are going to die. Startups are going to disrupt them. And then they're going to become big. And then they are going to get disrupted and so on and so forth. So let's now move on after having tried to understand disruptive innovation. And this is just to give you a flavor. To truly understand what disruptive innovation is, you will have to, as in most things in these sessions, dig in more, understand more. So these sessions will just be a starting point if you truly want to become an expert in disruptive innovation. Okay, so why is disruptive innovation important, and especially in today's context? So the internet revolution was a great equalizer in the sense that certain things which were not available to a lot of people suddenly became available. So if you wanted to open a store which could sell globally and you were a small little retailer in some small part of the world, suddenly by using things like eBay, PayPal, and whatever, you could become a global retailer and you could sell all over the globe. So this was something which was earlier reserved for very, very large companies, multinational companies, and so on and so forth. But now even a small person could become a multinational company. So one of the things which the internet did was it created this revolution. And what I like to believe is that while it changed many things, it also increased democracy in the world and made it more equitable. So, so it's this term of democratization, not necessarily democracy versus communism or whatever, but democratization. It helped that. And you know, the last 20 years have been more about the internet revolution and the beginning of what I believe is another big game changer, which is the platform revolution. Sorry about that. Okay, so so moving on to the platform revolution. So increasingly, things are becoming platforms. So Amazon, for instance, or Uber, Ola, Flipkart, you know, lots of Oyo, all of these were trying to be platforms. Zomato, Swiggy, you know, PayPal, Paytm. You could name a lot of things, you know, but we are still very much at the start of the platform revolution. But it is my belief that almost every sector will be affected by platforms and transformed by platforms, and it'll be quite a change. So at some point later, we will take an example of why I think this and why this platform revolution could be very important to understand for disruptive innovators. Okay, so now a lot of people, I mean, you hear the term AI, blockchain, quantum computing, a lot more than you hear the term disruptive innovation. Now, the interesting thing is that all these AI, blockchain, quantum computing are really tools which disruptive innovators can use. But disruptive innovation is the end result of trying to use some of these tools. So now, why should you do disruptive innovation? You've all heard the fable of slow and steady wins the race, right? So, and while disruptive innovation seems of trying to do things fast and quickly and, you know, not go in a very slow and measured approach, right? So we will cover that a little later. Just park that thought for right now and let's move on. So let's look at the costs and benefits of disruptive innovation. So in disruptive innovation, because you're trying to do things very fast, because you're moving into uncharted territories, unexplored worlds, right? There could be collateral damage, right? There could be, you could lose money, you could lose your life, you know, you could have all kinds of negative impacts with collateral damage. The one thing to contain collateral damage is to do quick course corrections. And while this sounds very easy that, okay, you just take a little area, do it there, learn, then expand it and all that. And that is clearly the way that you should do it. But sometimes it doesn't work out because only much later are the negative effects of disruptive innovation scene. So now trying to understand the cost of delay and the benefits of not delaying. So let's start off with chlorine. Now, chlorine was used to disinfect the water. And if you look at the history of chlorine as a disinfectant for water or chlorination of water, this was invented by a person called John Leo in New Jersey. And they went ahead and did something very, very rapidly. Now, that would have been very negative, and it would have created a lot of problems for the people who were drinking that water if there was a problem. But it was very fortunate that this worked, and chlorination of water ended up saving a huge number of lives. And in the scale of a change, which is such a massive change, like let's add this to the water kind of thing, it was done in a very, very short time and resulted in enormous benefits. Now, another case which went through a lot of, I think, testing, I'm not very sure of the history, but it was this thing called thalidomide. And people took thalidomide, and the negative effects of thalidomide, which created lots of deformed children and so on and so forth, were found much later. Now, the point I'm making here is that in some cases, even if you do a lot of testing, a lot of things, there is no guarantee that you're going to avoid collateral damage or problems of innovation. So now if you take this for COVID-19, this drug called remdesivir, so it has been approved in record time for emergency use kind of thing. Now, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Will we find out later? We don't know. But someone somewhere, and as a disruptive innovator, you will have to make this choice of trying to see how much, how slow you should go or how fast you should go, and so on and so forth. And then you'll have to convince other people to let you go fast to test out your innovation. And if they don't, then you won't be able to scale up your innovation. So it's pretty important to understand the costs and benefits of disruptive innovation. Now, who should learn disruptive innovation? So one very important constituency which should learn, they don't need to become experts. But they should generally get an idea of what are the benefits of disruptive innovation, what are the costs, and how they can together create an enabling ecosystem if they feel that disruptive innovation is very good for the citizens of their country. So I'm talking about bureaucrats, regulators, judiciary, and politicians. And as we go through the session, we will see through examples as to how all these people play a very crucial role in seeing whether a society benefits from disruptive innovation or whether it does not. So the other class of people who should pay a lot of attention to disruptive innovation, and again, they don't need to be the experts, but they need to understand this very well, are the CEOs of companies, especially big companies, because they are the most susceptible to disruptive innovation, and they could also benefit a lot from disruptive innovation. And we will see as we go along why most incumbent companies do not become disruptive innovators and actually kicked off their pedestals by disruptive innovators. So if you go through history and you look at the top, say, 50 companies by market cap, say right down starting from 1930, and then you take 20-year slices. So you go to 1950, you go to 1970, and so on and so forth. Then this could be an interesting exercise for you all to do. You could look at the US market because it's been around for quite a long time, and just see, who have the top 20 been and have they changed? And I think you'll find some very, very interesting things as to how these things have changed. So it's very, very important for CEOs to understand disruptive innovation and act on it. And we'll see through some of the case studies as we go along as to what implications this has. Finally, the last category, which really need to become the experts, and it's again not necessary for the CEO of an entrepreneurial initiative or an entrepreneurial initiative to be the expert on disruptive innovation, but if they are pursuing disruptive innovation, they need to have an expert on their team. So that are the people who should learn about disruptive innovation. And how deep you need to go will depend on what you want to do with your learning of disruptive innovation. And hopefully these sessions will give you a starting point. Now, what will the journey of disruptive innovation novice to expert look like? So one, you need to understand the language of disruptive innovation and do a lot of reading. Okay, these sessions alone are not going to help you. They'll get you started, but if you don't put in your own effort, it'll be suboptimal and you will not become an expert just by going through these sessions. The case studies that we will mention will actually make some of the theory come to life, because the theory by itself, at least I find it very boring. But when I can relate to real life examples, then it makes things real for me. Then there is no substitute for actually trying your hand at disruptive innovation and failing maybe, and then trying again. So the amount you learn by that, no amount of theory or listening to experts or whatever it is will teach you disruptive innovation and make you an expert. Finally, not everybody can become a disruptive innovator, right? So some people have it in their DNA, and to be a disruptive innovators, to be experts, just like some people can play cricket, and some people can play basketball. So if Sachin Tendulkar played basketball and Michael Jordan played cricket, they probably wouldn't be as great as they were. So you've got to listen to your inner voice and say, am I really suited out to be, do I get great joy from this? Am I good at it? Could I really become an expert? And if your inner voice tells you that you could, then by all means. Otherwise, you could stay on the fringes and get appreciation, and then try and work with people, find people who are experts and bring them into your team. So I'm going to end this session with 2 more slides. So one, talking about some resources. So almost every session will have some resources which you can look at. So one is the father of disruptive innovation, or who coined the term or made this thing a theory, was Clayton Christensen, who unfortunately passed away earlier this year. But you could go through his books, especially The Innovator's Solution and The Innovator's Dilemma, to understand a little bit more about disruptive innovation. Then there was a book that I used in one of my first disruptive innovation attempts, which was a book called A Passion for Excellence by a person called Tom Peters. There is this book called Good to Great by James Collins, which is another classic. It talks about why some companies make the leap from being good companies to great companies while others don't. And then there is a set of 20 videos put together by Sam Altman, who heads Y Combinator, on how to start a startup. So these are a lot of resources, for those who are really passionate about disruptive innovation. They will make the time to go through these and many more resources, because you cannot really become an expert unless you put in a lot of effort there. The exception being if you have a God-given gift and you are God's gift to mankind on disruptive innovation, then of course you don't need to put in effort. But I see very few people like that. Finally, the last slide in this session, and thank you if you've made it so far. And that is to give me feedback and to also post any questions that you may have had on this session. You can do that by sending a mail to sanjay@bharosaclub.com. The feedback will be used to improve sessions that follow. I know I'm not necessarily a great teacher. I have a lot to learn on that. So I will take some of your feedback and try and incorporate it into the future sessions. I hope you did enjoy the session and it wasn't too boring and dry, but I'll try. And again, no guarantees because it's not my forte, but I will try the best that I can to take your feedback and incorporate it into the future sessions. And finally, if you have a lot of, I'm sure there are a lot of questions, and I debated by trying to do a Zoom session with Q&A and so on and so forth directly in the session. But I thought that it may be simpler to just do the session and ask for questions in the email and then do a recap of the previous session when I start a session and also answer questions on that session. So the next session will begin with a recap of this session and answer any questions that I may have received. So thank you once again for your attention, and I hope disruptive innovation will help you live a better life. You may benefit from disruptive innovation by not being a disruptive innovator yourself, or you might benefit by being a disruptive innovator. So thank you very much.